card for Tim. She loves to give birthday cards. So for Tim Barker, Rankin Barker. She walked back and forth at least 3 times looking for him.
Yeah.
And finally she came back. I found him, she said.
Yeah. Tim Williams. So she was giving Tim Williams his goodbye. Year after year, we get a little older, and it's maybe not so great to have someone come in and charge you.
I don't know who is that?
John, hey,
Oh, okay.
yeah, with the mask you can't make out.
Oh,
He's wearing a mask.
yeah, I probably know him, but just, yeah. So how's Jen?
Good. We have finished celebrating turning 6 with Olive.
Oh.
Did you have his birthday party today?
We had a birthday party at Tarkington Park today,
Oh, yeah.
and he went to Chuck E. Cheese's with the kids that live next door yesterday. So,
Big
this has
deal, yeah.
been well celebrated.
She pretty happy about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
But Oliver's always happy about just
Oliver
about
is,
everything.
you don't need too much. He's such a nice kid.
He's so cute.
He's happy with anything.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good way to be in this world.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for coming this evening, and our folks who are joining us live streaming to part 2 of the Healing Zone. So we're going to start with, so this is a little bit of focus on relaxation, and I'll review where that fits in with everything we're talking about. But we'll start just beginning with a couple of ways that people do relaxation. So one is to experience and feel how it is to tense your body up and then relax, right? So you could do this from head to toe. We're not going to do that. We'll just do a couple of muscle tension things. And so I'll have you tense your muscles, and we'll go to the count of 5, and then we'll relax. So the 2 things that we'll do is I'll have you tense your shoulders, and then after that we'll tighten our fists. Okay, so first for 5 seconds we'll tense our, shrug your shoulders and tense them up. So ready, go. And release. And just notice how that feels. The muscles that were tight, kind of the more you let them release, the more kind of relaxation that kind of goes in there. So, all right. Now let's do that with our fists, and let's tighten them up. And release. And that probably has a little bit of a different feel to it, because this is a bigger muscle set than the muscles in our hands, right? What do you notice with as you did that?
You add a little anger into that?
Well, yes. We'll get to that part.
5 seconds is short. Thank you.
It is, yes, right. So if you're really tensing your muscles up, that could be a strain if it lasted very long, yeah. Okay, so that is one way that we can sort of rehearse for our bodies that we do have stress that we hold in our bodies, right? And when we do, so we're exaggerating it by tensing up, and then then that helps us feel the relaxation, right? So another big part of when people do relaxation, a big thing that we do is talk about breathing, deep breathing. And there's some biological reasons for that, but usually we can just notice and feel how it feels. So the way that we want to breathe is, when we practice this, and we do this together, is we want to breathe in to fill our bellies. And the best way is, like, if your shoulders don't move, then you know you're filling your diaphragm, right? Your stomach and diaphragm area, instead of trying to lift a space in your lungs, right? Which actually adds to tension when you do that. But if you keep your shoulders still and breathe into your belly and in through your nose, out through your mouth. If you breathe in through your mouth, you tend to get a lot more air in too fast, which is okay, but it also helps with the relaxation to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, okay? So there's a way then to just do it simply, to follow your hand and to breathe in while you're going up and out while you're going down. So let's practice that together. If you're not used to belly breathing, then that may be a lot of things to concentrate on at the same time. But once you practice it a bit, then you don't have to focus on that, and you can just focus on this. So if you put your hand and you just start here and you breathe in, that's a short one. And if you get more practiced at that, then you can go a little slower. Of course, that first one's a little short there, yeah, but that'll get you started. So though that is just a short little relaxation moment, along with the progressive muscle relaxation is a way that we can do that. There's lots of ways we can do that. So why is relaxation important? It's because it's a reset. So last time we talked about our trauma response or our anxiety response to challenging situations. And when that is in our bodies, we feel that tension or we have that reaction. Relaxation is something that helps us reset. So that's not only important for our bodies to kind of feel more calm, but our brains actually don't function so well when we're anxious. You've probably noticed that, right? And the more, if you're extremely anxious, at some point your brain will shut off its best, most complex thinking in the cortex and just be on reaction. And of course, if we really shut down, then we faint. And then we're totally in survival mode. The brainstem is just kind of keeping things rolling while we check out for a while. So that's the primary role of relaxation in thinking about what we do with trauma, is that it's a physical and mental reset button. So all of that is prior to our introduction today. So some of the introduction that we have is repeated from last time. I'm Alan Archibald, a licensed clinical social worker and a family and trauma professional, and specifically a trauma-focused cognitive behavior certified therapist. So this is not therapy, right? This is learning about these things, learning about mental health and about trauma, how we retain and tap into our health, even we may not feel so healthy, so how do we find our health, and thinking about that. And one of the nice things about an educational setting is that when we're in learning mode, we're not necessarily defending against anything. We're just kind of taking in what fits for us and setting aside what doesn't. Sometimes easier for certain things. Whoops, wrong direction. So then talking about healing zone is a way to sort of think about our goal with justice and advocacy, that helping people understand part of mental health and part of how to heal trauma is by making it safe for others. So even if I have expertise in how to heal from trauma, if I come and tell you, I know what you need, here it is, do this, that may not always feel supportive. And if I have just one piece of knowledge, that also may actually make people feel less listened to, less safe, if they feel like there's an expectation that they act or respond in a certain way. So building community where it's safe enough to heal, part of that is respecting each other and where we're at. If I have a story to offer, it's my story, and my answer is not necessarily your answer, but we're learning about trauma in general. The evidence-based practice that we're kind of organizing our thoughts on is called Trauma-Focused Cognitive Behavior Therapy. And this is the acronym for the STEPS practice, TICE. We're just doing these 4, right? So psychoeducation, our first session was that, getting a lot of information about the brain and how it processes traumatic memories. Relaxation today, we've started with that, but we'll also do some things that we may not think of as exactly as relaxation. And then we'll also add in affective regulation, so learning about emotions, and then C, cognitive distortions. So we talked about our brains, and one of the things that we mentioned, this is the review section of today, is that when we're thinking about traumatic experiences, which we've thought about, is that trauma is the result of both something that happened, but also our level of vulnerability. So that's why childhood trauma is talked about so much, because when we are young, we are more vulnerable. The younger we are, the more vulnerable we are. The younger we are, and the more vulnerable we are, the easier it is to be traumatized by something. The easier it is for something not to make sense and to be overwhelming. So event plus vulnerability is what adds up to trauma. The brain stem handles survival, things like breathing, which we just practiced, right? A reset for breathing. Our heartbeat, balance, body temperature regulation, a lot of things that are necessary that we don't think about. Right? The limbic brain, or the emotional part of the brain, gives our immediate response to situations, people, places, things, our reactive response. I have survival listed for the brainstem because those are the things that are actually to do with if we have a perception that life and death is involved, if we have a perception that it's safety, like there is something dangerous, not that I'm going to be, not that I'm doomed, not that there's no hope, but there's a safety issue, then I'm activated with adrenaline to respond to that. And then the cortex, neocortex, is the part of the brain that has all these awesome capacities. Well, all the parts of the brain have awesome capacities, but for both logic and creativity. Trauma is held in our brains and our bodies so that, so that we experience it both as something that our brain holds in memory, but also there may be certain actions that we do or something that might remind us, whether it's any kind of sensory experience, might remind us of something negative. Because because of the bias of our brain is for survival, things that are traumatic are permanent, right? Those will not go away. And that's what we talked last time about, how sometimes our positive memories tend to fade, whereas traumatic memories, we might try to make them fade, but they're still there. So that's just this slide is that reminder that survival mode is given the priority. There's a hierarchy based on survival, not based on you're a negative Nancy, right? That's, sorry, Nancy. It's not about being negative. It's about that's how we're built. So our emotional reaction we talked about, emotional last time. This is kind of a review, but starting to look at our emotions more. That we might have emotional reaction to these pictures, although we're going to be fair to cats and dogs, right? We have a cat in the neighborhood that comes bounding when, a neighbor's cat that comes running, that cat acts like a dog, right? But it's a cat. Right? So some cats are very friendly, but some cats, when they have their head down and their behind up, well, we know that's a pounce.
Jill was just talking about her neighbors.
Yes.
Her cat, she was watching them, and they had said the person was visiting had a big dog, Doberman dog.
Yes.
And this cat was sneaking up and trying to attack him everywhere. And one time when they moved, he even climbed up on this tree and was over on the branch to get down, get at it.
A fearless hunter, yes, right.
She said it was quite entertaining.
Yes, well, is that the Siamese cat?
No, it was.
Oh, it's another one.
Different.
All right,
Cat.
yes. So when dogs have their head down and they're behind up in the air, then we know they're getting ready to play, right? But in the meantime, we as humans have had long-standing relationships with these animals, and so we often feel comfort around them. But if you've had a negative experience, you also might have, maybe not necessarily traumatic, although it could be that, but you might have an experience of anxiety around a certain animal. Okay, so this is that kind of built-in response we have in the emotional center of the brain is just kind of a way of moving into talking about our emotions. And this, I call this the emotional GPS. Like, what's going on? Where am I? If if everything's cool and you're feeling your best self and all that's going great, you might love looking at the 64 emojis and picking out just exactly how you feel. But if I'm under stress and under duress, I can't handle 64, right? I need something that's kind of a blunt instrument that I can use much more easily without having to focus so much. So this is a kind of a way to organize feelings in just a much more general way with just 4 basic sets. And they're built into the way that we feel them in our bodies. So active energy and passive energy, right? Active energy, mad is active. When we're angry, there's a surge of energy that goes through, right? It's active. And glad, when we're happy, we also feel that surge of active energy, right? When we're nervous and worried, we don't feel so much that active energy, right? We feel a little more hesitant, or let's hold on a minute, right? And so it's more passive, but it has the same intensity that anger has, right? Anger is active and intense, it's focused. Fear and worry is passive, but it's intense, right? So that's the contrast, the way that those two feel. Glad is more relaxed, less focused, more relaxed, but still active. And then sad is passive and relaxed. Does that kind of framework make sense there? And I actually have a handout for you to look at that more closely. So that's just the first kind of look at kind of how that's organized. So now that I gave you a piece of paper, I'm going to ask you to stand up. Okay. So we're going to, if you were playing charades, right, and you had to get someone to guess mad, right? Let's just act out that, right? It's going to be active and intense, right? So, right? So just act that out so you can feel it, right? You can feel the anger, right? So, and then if we're going to go to worry, it has still that intensity, but it's a little bit more like that, right? If you're scared, right? If you're trying to get someone to guess scared through your charades, yes. Yeah, what's going on? That's good, that fits right here. Like, get some answers. Okay, and sad has a passive, relaxed, right? The energy just drops down. And then, how about glad, happy? I got a little energy, but not intensity, just, not that, right? So if you do that, you can feel that the energy in your body shifts depending on which emotional state, right? Okay, thank you for your experiential work there. Okay, so so there's a lot of things that I like to do with this. One of the things that I don't have up on this because I didn't want to get too busy. When we feel anger, so the feeling in our body is that active energy. It's usually related to a belief or thought or belief that something's unfair. That's not right? This is unfair. So if if it's a mosquito buzzing around your head, you may not think this is unfair. You may just be mildly irritated, right? It's still in the same category. And you're probably not going to have an existential conversation with you, go, why did God create mosquitoes, right? But you might.
I was just having one of those with a wasp over.
Okay, yes. This time of year, we get a lot of those. So anger is, the word unfair goes with anger. Right? With afraid, it's the word unsure. So when we're unfamiliar, uncertain, unsure, then we have that pause, right? What's going on here? That, or, I'm in trouble here. That goes with fear, depending on how intense it is, right? But it's about being unsure. So I might just be unsure as what's happening next, or I might be unsure as to my survival. Those are having two different levels of intensity, but those are both about a thought that I don't know what's happening here. With sad, it's that something's missing, right? So there's a thought or a belief, a sense that something is missing, probably something at least somewhat important. And glad is a little bit more difficult to pinpoint, I think, sometimes, but it's that there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. So if it were like, all my questions have been answered, well, then you might be really happy. If you're just like, oh, thank goodness the milk's not spoiled, right? Okay. Whatever. So unfair, unsure, something's missing, and nothing to worry about are kind of thoughts, beliefs that go with those emotions that are happening. So we could access the emotion either way. You can say, well, that's not right. And then I can say, I'm pretty sure I'm feeling mad right now, right? Or I could go, I feel angry. Well, what do I think's wrong? So I could access either my thoughts, which I may not be aware of, or I could access my emotion, which I'm not aware of, by understanding that those things kind of pair together, right? So, so the same with each of these emotions. Does that kind of make sense as?
On being mad,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm an intense person at times, but growing up, I was bad because I got mad.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no place to go with that except I was bad.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that you can be mad and use it for good, like you said there.
Right.
But I think often the opposite happens.
Mm-hmm.
Is you
Yeah.
you can't do anything because you just think you're bad.
Right.
So you're sort of frozen.
So you can kind of see how these things are worded to help us not make value judgments about the emotions, because they are simply information about what's happening within us, right? They're information. The thing that happens, well, so I'm kind of loop back to that in a minute, but I'm going to say something more about this part of the purpose and what happens, and then how one of the common ways that anger gets off on the wrong foot and gets distorted, and then it's not the only way that happens, but it's one of the ways that happens. So the purpose of anger then activates this intense active energy so we can make things better, right? So the example of Dr. King is like such a public, great example of anger. All of his civil rights work, preaching and all of that, wasn't because he was afraid. You don't get, I mean, I'm sure he had many moments of being afraid, but in general, it didn't come from a place of worry and fear. It wasn't from being sad, certainly not from being happy. It had a lot of anger in it. But it was focused on how to find a path forward, how to make things better. And so that anger was channeled for its purpose. That active intensity gives us what we need to address things that are unfair. With fear, the purpose of fear is to pay attention closely and get some answers. So we have the intensity, but the pausing is for us to take in all that sensory information, get all the facts. So what's going on here, right? So it's really important to pause and get some answers. Now I can move forward, or let it go. Oh, that was a nothing burger, right? You know, sad. The purpose of sadness is to calmly reflect so we deepen our values, right? So if I'm going to reflect on what's important to me, to let it sink in is not something that has that intensity like, okay, I've got 5 minutes, I'm gonna sink, I'm gonna really, really feel these deep feelings. No, it's more like taking some time, pausing, letting that kind of surface. Appreciation of things happens when we let gratitude surface. It doesn't, it's not forced. I was thinking when they pick up trash, the trash comes the trash is picked up on Thursday mornings at my house, and when the trash truck comes, if I happen to be watching when they take it and it drives off, I never think, I'm gonna miss that trash, right? Right, because we don't feel sad about things that are not valuable, right? Things that you throw out don't have value, and so we don't feel connection and sadness about those things, right?
But I feel good about the recycling when it goes away.
There you go, yes. Now you've done something, and you don't think of that as anger, but it's determination, right? I'm gonna make sure that recycling gets in the recycling bin and gets out there and gets taken to the proper place, right? That doesn't happen by accident. You have to at least put a little focus to it, right? So determination is anger, definitely focused to make things better. And then glad, the purpose of feeling glad is to let go of that intensity and rebuild energy, right? So the word recreation, recreation, when we do things that are fun, they might tire us out physically, but emotionally, they rebuild our energy. They give us some renewal. So these are in very general ways. This helps us to value all the emotions, right? Because they each have their function. And if we try to not ever feel sad, well, we're going to really miss out on something important. Right? If I try not ever, I fear nothing. I don't worry about anything. Well, ignorance will be your friend. No, I mean, there's a lot of answers you make, yeah, right, because you didn't stop to notice, right? I never get angry about anything. Well, there's a lot of things in this world that could be better.
Alan, question about that.
Yep.
I grew up in a family, I can tell you 2 times when my dad got mad.
Yeah.
Once when one of his students was killed on the way home from seminary at Christmas time.
Yeah.
And the other one had to do with getting involved in problems at church.
Really?
But I now sit here and ask
Yeah.
myself, maybe we all would have been better off if we'd given a little vent to that anger and worked with it,
Yeah,
as opposed to always trying to keep an even keel.
yeah, yeah.
Carl never gets mad,
Okay.
never gets
But
mad.
does he get even?
No, he doesn't get even
Doesn't get
either.
even. Okay. All right.
But you sometimes don't really know what's going on with him,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the next part then comes back to what you've both talked about. Anger sometimes is a little enigmatic or puzzling or whatever. So if we try to, in addition to identifying the emotion, identify the intensity, like give it a score from 0 to 10. If it's 0, then you don't have it. But if it's 1 to 10, you can rate where that is, and then the term that's used is window of tolerance. And that's I guess a fancy way of saying, how much anger can you tolerate before you become irrational, right? So, and then how much fear can you tolerate until you become irrational? How much sadness can you tolerate until you become irrational? So it's almost certainly not going to be 7 on each of those, right? It's going to be different. Like, I can tolerate being very angry, and I'm still completely rational. Fear, no, not. If I get a little too worried, then I'm over. It's over. And sad, over time, I've developed a better ability to tolerate more sadness, and I'm pretty decent at tolerating being happy. And a lot of people are, but there are people who really have a hard time with being happy. And that's, based on some of their experiences where, if you let your guard down, that's when it happens, right? And I would think that just culturally, our experience here is if you let your guard down and something happens, it's not necessarily it's probably not going to be as catastrophic as it might be if you're in a survival context somewhere. If you're in Ukraine right now, in the middle of combat, you probably don't let yourself get too relaxed. I don't know. But that would be the kind of thing where it's not so functional to be happy, right, in certain contexts. So knowing kind of our window of tolerance helps us. We don't have to call it window of tolerance, just know your tolerance score, right? I can only tolerate this much fear. If I'm kind of getting a little bit like, oh, I can't, I've got this to do, and I've got that to do, and I'm all disorganized and I just can't settle down, then that's when we go to the relaxation, right? That's when you use relaxation for your reset to bring your anxiety level down into your window of tolerance so that you can be rational again. So you can go, okay, wait a minute, you know what I need to do? I just need to write a list here so I can see everything I have to do, right? We do this kind of stuff, right? On a regular basis. But sometimes we have emotions bounce us outside of our window of tolerance, and then we don't have an idea of what to do, right? So being able to relax and calm helps us get back into the space that we can tolerate, and then we can use the smart part of our brain up here to come up with new answers, or to say, I'm clueless here. I'm going to call Jan, right? And ask her, what do you do when you right? Or, that's what we do. We reach out to other people, or sometimes we don't even ask them for assistance. We just get together, and by connecting with someone, we feel calmer, right? And so So that kind of, I've got all this elaborate stuff about all this little four paned window, right? But it's just trying to actually, it's very much for this purpose of when it gets to be too much, how do we get a handle on it? If we have some sense that this actually kind of works for us, and you might think about that. If it works for you, then you can kind of turn to that if you need to get yourself resettled. So, okay, this is where I am with this, and I can, as long as I'm in the purpose zone here, my score is going to go down eventually, right?
Kind of our personalities, we might have more problems with one of those areas than.
Absolutely, right, yeah. I've said, everyone has their favorite color, everyone has their favorite emotion, right? And so like if you're in neutral or if you're just on cruise control, you're in whatever you're in, right? That's just what you do. And you'll be, if you're in that, you're totally in your window of tolerance, right? You won't have to worry about being, because that's your zone. So the thing that happens with trauma is that trauma, of course, forces us into a passive stance, right? That's what it means to be traumatized, is to be powerless in the situation. So the stronger, more complicated, more intense that our experiences of trauma have been, the more likely we're going to have difficulty with fear and sadness, because they're going to remind us, those little hints of feeling powerless are going to pull us into the black hole of trauma recall or triggering or flashbacks or whatever we want to call it, right? Whatever happens. So traumatic experiences tend to get people trying to make a dividing line there. So what happens is when you're fearful, it's the easiest thing to do is to shift from, keep the intensity, right? You've got this intense, and you just step forward, right? You're still intense, you just get active. And that is destructive anger, right? I've shifted into anger, but I don't have the focus about making things better. My focus is just to stop feeling scared. In 12-step groups, they call it feeling substitution, right? You're scared, so you substitute anger. So this is the big, long way of saying feeling substitution, right? But I feel like this is important because there's a reason for feeling substitution. Again, it's not because you're a jerk or because, you've got some horrible malady. It's probably because you're avoiding being reminded of your traumatic experience, right? When you felt powerless and helpless. With sadness, when people are sad and feeling depressed, and it's reminding them of trauma, they'll convert that to feeling happy. Again, you're already in a passive mode, or you're in the relaxed mode, and you just shift from passive into active. You say, relax, yeah. And this is a lot of fuel, or this is a lot of the area where substance abuse happens, right? Is I'm feeling sad, and I take this substance and I get this false happiness, right? So that
It gives you the feeling that you dealt with it?
it gives you the feeling like, I'll get up and I'll just go, I'll do something. I'm not sort of paralyzed here, sitting with this sadness. And even, so there's also something in substance abuse called euphoric recall, which is that if you're thinking about stuff that went bad, or when you were under the influence. Remember that time when, when three of us all got high and, never spent our whole paycheck? But you don't say that. You say, and we did this out and we had a great time, and wasn't that the best? Those were good times, weren't they? Right? Happy. We were happy. No. That was very, very sad. So if I stay in sadness, if I can tolerate that, it will deepen. I will say, it's really important for me to do things that are good for myself. I do care about myself. I do care about my life. And I care about the people around me. Maybe I've hurt people. I don't want that, right? Those things can be tough to face, right?
So I have a question about,
Yeah.
Can somebody go from the right-hand quadrant to the left-hand bottom quadrant?
No. Yeah. Yes. No, they can't.
That's
but
crossing.
right. So when that happens, it's a different kind of thing. So like you can see people go from anger to sadness, right? But you see the flip in the switch, right? It's very obvious. Same from worry. Oh, happy, worry, happy. Whereas when you shift from fear into anger, you just think that person's mad. You don't say, oh, I see what you did there, right? And when you shift from sad into glad, the same thing. It's not, unless you're tuned into it, the shift is not so noticeable. But when you go to the opposite extremes, then it's so different. Yes.
What is it, Alan, that makes you go diagonally instead of across?
Well, those are usually, well, I don't know. I mean, sometimes that's relationship patterns, is that you shift from one to the other based on, there's a thing called a drama triangle, which is not necessarily scientifically backed up, but it's where people in a negative relationship will shift from victim to persecutor. One person's attacking the other person, and then at some point the other person's had enough of it, and they turn back and say, why do you always do this? And then the other person, I'm sorry, they kind of chase around these roles of being perpetrator and victim to each other. Those are places where those roles shift. I haven't thought about a lot of other situations where they do that. And I'm not, we're not necessarily going into this, but there are also roles in family. So I would say it's a lot about power and love. So in families that are reasonably well organized and functional, so the oldest male is going to copy somewhat like the favorite strategy of the father. The oldest male is going to do that because there's enough power or efficacy, ability to accomplish things, and affection to feel like, okay, that's a place to go. The oldest female will shift the other way, but then everything can get complicated and turned around. And so children find their place in the constellation of families of how to get what they need in terms of I can do things, or I can learn to do things for myself, and that's intuitively picked up, but that's a little more fuzzy.
Question.
people become a couple and they're in an intimate relationship, does it take a while to get this all worked out?
Oh, of course. but I mean, I think below the conscious level of awareness, that if I like to go around and start blaming people for doing this and that's wrong and why don't people pay attention to what they're doing? If I'm like, my favorite thing is anger, I might be, so if I want an intense relationship, then I need a partner who is going to be in the sad space. That's going to create a lot of juice. Or this is going to create a lot of juice. But if I have a less electric relationship, one that's kind of like is more mutually supportive and whatever, then it may be that we connect across parallel, because we have the similarities instead of the opposites. So you get the old movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Did you ever see that one? Where Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, right, just are horrible to each other. They have a couple over, and they're just vicious and horrible. And then the couple leaves, and they're like, "Oh, good night." I mean, that's how they operate together. It's very dysfunctional, but but it is a character study in how being a victim and being a perpetrator can be quite the pair. So. All right, well, the second thing, the thing I wanted to do then with this, also related to trauma, as well as seeing that these things, the passive emotions, can make us want to avoid these emotions, especially one or the other. And it's just really important to be able to reclaim that emotional territory that we might have avoided. As you can see, like we do want to deepen our values so we can live out of them. Not what someone else told me my values are, what my values are, right? And here, if there's something that I don't know how to do or whatever, I need to get some answers. I need to be able to know how to move forward. If I just go, hey, I got it, I'm going to make the same mistake over and over and over, and wonder why. So this little, so if our positive memories are energizing, anchoring memories, can help us deal with, and actually I hadn't thought so much about it, but these accomplishments also help us counterbalance the times when we feel helpless and stuck. Then this little exercise is a way of helping to strengthen that. So there's what we're looking at here. There. So it's kind of common to talk about triggers. I think the anti-woke people don't like the trigger-free zones, and I'm not sure I like the trigger-free zones either, but I mean, not that I want people to be triggered, but to help people with that. So the idea of a flashback or an emotional trigger, something that kind of takes you to a space that it's not like what's present, but something else, is kind of like a spider web. You touch this part, right, and the whole web resonates. So if I had this negative experience here at age 16, something that happens here or here can take me right back there, right? We usually don't think of that with success memories. We think of that with traumatic memories. People talk about, difficult things that they're triggered into. Those triggers happen naturally, but these triggers also happen, and we can strengthen them in order to help us have more resources to either reset for ourselves when we need to, or not get sucked into that kind of spiraling down that can happen. So there's nothing sort of magical about these ages. It's just kind of a way of eliciting ideas of success. So, but let's ask you all to maybe offer something where you felt something that happened. It could be from any of those ages, like could be at any time, could have been yesterday, whatever. When you felt strong and capable. Like, where does your imagination take you if I say, when did you feel strong and capable? When was the time? Yeah.
I think I was in 3rd grade, and my principal, I don't know that he took me under his wing exactly, but I know he made me, I think, the leader of the safety patrol, and just was such a kind person. And it was really it's a memory I have.
Yeah.
And it's a successful memory.
Yeah. Okay. So that would go that box there, right?
Yeah.
And it's helpful, like with that, to pair an affirmation with it. So you could say, he was one of the first people to recognize that I could be an effective leader. You could make, you said he was kind. You could say, I love it when people are kind to me. That's kind of that's not a real strong on the affirmation side, but it is actually. So what other memories come to mind for people?
I remember playing football.
Uh-huh.
I felt kind of insecure. Some of them are a lot bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
One time, the coach, before everyone told him how well I held up under pressure.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I know you were a center, so there's pressure when you're hiking the ball and you have to, you're going to get attacked. Yeah. Yeah.
About knocked me out.
Yeah.
He says, "Don't be trying to go through him because he's, and it was, oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good here.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It's
Yeah.
some of those things that stick in your mind.
Right. So that, and then so the affirmation that you would make out of that is that, you did a good job. I did a good job.
I may not want to be playing this position much longer.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
When I was 19, I got on an airplane in Louisville, Kentucky, and flew to Miami, and then flew to Bogota, Colombia, and got off the plane, and the next day got delivered to a family that I had no knowledge of, and that was where I was going to live.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak Spanish. I studied Spanish,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
But throughout that year, and with a whole lot of patience on the part of a whole lot of Colombians, I got fluent in Spanish.
Yeah.
And, I feel real successful and real powerful when I go up to somebody in Spanish and start talking to them, and they say to me, "Where did you learn Spanish?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I learned it in Bogota, Colombia."
Yeah.
But, you know, I had a lot of feelings of fear
Absolutely.
when
Right.
I stepped on
Right.
that airplane.
So that's a great example. I mean, so that's kind of an increasing example of, because you know the football one is there's some nervousness and anxiety there, and then you have the positive, and then that sounds like even more intense anxiety. So when the success comes in the face of anxiety, it's going to have a little more oomph to it, right? Right. And that's great. We want to identify those things and look back and find places where we had stress and we managed to make it. Or, you know, even if you didn't thrive, you know, if you thrive, that's awesome. But sometimes just getting through it is great.
Carl and I were trying to get pregnant,
Yeah.
and after a while had a miscarriage, and never got pregnant again.
Yeah.
And it was pretty awful.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we were able to adopt Carol.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like we understood grief at a much younger age than many of our friends.
Sure.
Because we'd gone through that experience of
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
lost our fertility or never
Yeah.
having any in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
And we survived it.
Yeah.
And our marriage came out intact, which statistically somewhat of a miracle.
Yeah. So, how would you say that as an affirmation?
That we walked that path and figured out how to get where we wanted to be, which was really creating a family.
Yeah.
And we did it.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it was pretty bumpy along the way,
Yeah.
but we had a lot of help from a lot of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we
So-
ultimately got there.
Both of your examples are about being kind of lost, and I found my way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I got lost, but I found my way. In
Yeah.
Bogota,
Yeah.
and in terms of family.
Yeah,
So-
that's one of the things I say to myself is, I survived. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, look, we survived this. We can
Right.
we can cope with having a daughter who's a drug addicted and on house release. And,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Right. You know, to be lost and find your way is such a critical life skill. Right. And recognizing it, if you're going to recognize it, you're going to have to, you know, just going back to that grid, you're going to have to notice the anxiety that was there when you were lost. Right. You're going to have to be able to connect with it.
I don't know if any of you knew John Wimmer. He was one of our first pastors, and when he was, I think maybe even in high school, one of his friends died. And it always seemed to me that John understood grief and the feelings that we go through. He was 29 when he came to our church,
Yeah.
I think. And it was just totally different than the way other people I knew felt about things.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called, well, the publishers made him call it No Pain, No Gain.
Oh.
That was not what John wanted for a title. but
Yeah, yeah.
It was a good book.
Yeah, he's a special man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So by identifying these things, right, and reminding ourselves of them, we strengthen, or to switch metaphors, we anchor these positive memories. You know, and that's a helpful image. I mean, this is a helpful image, like to say there is a negative web and there is a positive web. I think, but then the anchor, like the idea that something that helps us not drift too far away, right, is helpful with success memories. And it's important for us to look at them and to notice them, because they will fade away, right? And so I think, you know, for people, you know, and being here in this sanctuary, right, one of the things that happens on a regular basis for people who come to worship here is that we come and are reminded of goodness, the positive values we have, our experiences through our faith. You know, it's an anchoring of what, you know, what helps us on the success, things that we've navigated through anxieties and difficulties and challenges, as well as other people. And being in a space, whether it's a fancy, awesome space like this, or I used to attend school in a little multi-purpose room in a building, and it still had that reminder, right? That reminder, elementary school, that we do that. We strengthen the anchors that we find for the empowerment that we need.
Oh, and here's a question. Returning citizens and women who are in prison. Here's a question. Returning citizens and women who are in prison that I work. I now have had total liberation. We'll say
they also remain, I'm sure, very common among the women you're talking about. And the thing that sexual abuse does pretty consistently that people often don't think about is it destroys trust.
Yeah.
Right? So, because usually the way sexual abuse happens is that there's some building of trust before the abuse, and then there's threats to not tell. And so the betrayal that happens there is about as deep as could ever happen, right? So that betrayal makes it very difficult to trust whether you can trust anyone, right? So, so that's one thing that makes it difficult to kind of connect with some of these successes, right? Another thing is when if they've experienced physical abuse. So that the thing about physical abuse is, of course, it's terrifying and all of that. But if you only got in trouble, even if you were like beaten for every little thing you did wrong, that would be probably a little less impact than the fact that you get beaten for not doing anything wrong, right? Because it's not about what you did as a kid, it's about the mood of the person who's doing the beating, right? So your experience is to always look over your shoulder. Like, no matter what's happening right now, no matter how great it is, something bad is coming.
And whatever I'm doing going to fall on that person?
Right.
Trigger.
Right. So all of these successes might just be the precursor for something horrible happening, right? And that's not something you think in your head, that's something you know, even though it's false. You know it in your body.
Right.
You know you can't trust people. You know something bad is coming, no matter how good things are. And the third thing is, if you've witnessed your parents or parental figures being violent with each other. And that, especially in this kind of window from 3 to 6, people will talk about, I hid behind the couch, I hid behind the wall. And they felt in their bodies, I wish I didn't exist. I wish I were not here, right? Because you have so little ability to
Do anything.
right. You're completely and utterly powerless with people who you're attached to. You know, the people I'm attached to are trying to kill each other. It looks like to me as a little
Yeah,
kid, right?
sure.
And there's zero thing, I can't do anything about it. The utter despair and powerlessness of that. And so, under stress, they feel like they wish they could die. They just wish, they're not like trying to hurt themselves.
I just need
They
to
just-
disappear.
I just need to disappear. I wish I wouldn't wake up tomorrow. That kind of thing. And they battle that, not knowing that's a flashback. That's your stress today is reminding you of what it was like then. Now today might be challenging, but it's not,
Yeah.
you know. So those three things related to trauma, I think really interfere with being able to anchor and hold on to those strengths. And one of the reasons I do this is to help people see those things, those are trauma pieces. If we can help you remember your trauma in a different way, then you can get your space from that and begin you're just it's not someone else's idea of
Yeah, well, it's a long process.
it is. Like particular points of their early life, really three things, of course, right? Those are with people and say this is, you have, if you letting your defenses down. Second, things that happen in young children happen at gunpoint.
Yeah.
How that
need-
happens. Yeah.
Maybe with someone really good to them, good experience. Really, for may not seem that.
And in some small way, I just add a little one here. How big a deal is that? That's huge, right?
Sometimes you have really no idea
No,
what you've done or
Right.
said.
right.
Same building with me. Afraid I didn't know what you might say or not say.
Right, right. It's your gut, right?
Yeah.
Like, to be willing to be stupid. In service of, it seems like you're having a hard time today. No, I'm not. No, well, it still may have been just the thing the kid needed.
Yeah.
Even though
To know that somebody else
they
is
needed
aware.
to, right, well, I'm not gonna let you in, but inside, oh, someone cares. You never know. But I've tried to be better and better about being willing to be stupid. I think it's a good skill.
One of my best skills was my clumsiness,
Mm-hmm.
because, kids need to make mistakes when they're learning a language.
Yeah, right.
And Senora trips over the cord, or she forgets to plug it in and she can't get the
Right.
machine to work.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty obvious that, hey, we're gonna work through this, we're gonna get
Right.
moving
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
I think about Tina.
Exchange student. Yeah.
You know about, but anyway, she was an exchange student and come over.
Yeah.
And we were nice to her. We we just thought,
Oh, you guys are nice to everybody.
but she tells it is, so it made such a difference in her life.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
didn't,
You didn't have any idea at the time.
yeah.
Yeah, she was troubled. We didn't know why. She didn't warm up to Jill, our daughter. They were the same age. And Jill's very outgoing, and Tina was withdrawn. And so she spent a lot of time with Dan and me. And she left when she got home. Well, we knew her mother had died. When she got home, she made the doctors tell her that her mom had committed suicide. And so those 9 months she spent with us, she just talks about how important they were. And we didn't know what to do. We were just opened our home, and
Yeah, what was perfectly normal for you wasn't at all normal for her.
Right, yeah. So, and then I've had a couple of students when I was teaching many years ago, and the one, well, there are two of them, but the one gal, she was, well, it was all reservation. And she's had every kind of trauma you can imagine, and yet almost every post on Facebook, she says, just remember we're all walking each other home.
What a lovely thought.
Yeah. So, I don't know, she says I was important to her, but, well,
Yeah.
she was abused, and she was the oldest of 5 kids, and when her folks went off on, some 3-week whatever, she had to take
She
care
was
of
the
those
one in
kids.
charge, and she probably felt responsible for protecting all the younger ones.
She did. So there's trauma that, I don't even know the half of it.
Yeah.
But even
Right.
as an adult, she
Right.
was traumatized.
Yeah, so these positive things, there are ways that our trauma experiences do interfere with absorbing these positives, but for the most part, they're still there and very important and really critical for people to, when they want to heal, it's really critical that we have some of these experiences to really experience in our body that we have some power and some agency and some ability to make good things happen. So that is it for today.
Thank you, Alan.
All right.
Thank
Yeah,
you
that
very
was
much.
Good. Very good, in fact, helpful.
So next time will be September 24th, I think. Yeah, the last Sunday of the month, again at 5, and we'll look more at some of those beliefs that come from trauma, some of what I referred to, and how they are, the way that they enter for us happens about at the stage of development we're at and at a particular level of vulnerability. And so if I just say, hey, I want to stop thinking that way, it's probably not going to work.
I've
Right.
noticed that.
Yeah. A lot of people have noticed that. Like, I can't stop thinking, I know I should think different. And that's because we're not looking at how to soothe ourselves at the age and developmental level that we were when that happened. So part of that is just being able to be able to stay in that window of tolerance while looking at what happened, right? If I can do that, then I can notice what it is I need. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than that, but, well, maybe a lot of times, but that's a big part of it, is being
Look
able.
at spider webs differently.
Yes, right. They're amazing.